Hi everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Biodiversity Podcast by Teasels. And as you can guess, we've come out of Zoom for today, and we're doing the second in-person podcast. And today I'm joined by Dick Newell of Action for Swifts. How are you, Dick?
I'm good, Dan, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Good to be here. Well, it's not the first time I've been here. I was here last week for an amazing show at the what do you call it? The Swift Party, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was Swift Awareness Week, and so we did an event here for the locals and others, and yes, I think our Swift did us proud.
They certainly did. I think we were in the flight line of them, weren't we?
Yes.
So Dick, so for the people that are watching and listening to this podcast that perhaps don't know about Swifts and what you do you want to just give a bit of a brief introduction to yourself and how you've come to this point where you're working for Action for Swifts?
Sure. Well, these days much of my life is engaged with doing something for Swifts, and it all started, I don't know, over 20 years ago, when right behind me here a pair of Swifts were trying to get into a hole in the brickwork, a hole that was too small.
Yeah.
And I came out one morning and there was a Swift with its wings stuck in the hole. So I got a ladder out, managed to get it out, and held it high and off it went. And I thought, well, if the hole's too small, we better try and put up a nest box. And at the time, I knew not a whole lot about nest boxing.
But your active mind kicked in, I guess.
Yeah, well, prior to that was pretty close to my retirement. I retired from the software industry. I'd built a number of software companies which were quite successful. And software is all about identifying problems worth solving and then figuring out an effective solution. I mean, that's how you make money in software.
Yeah. And
anyway, I'd given up doing that, went into retirement, and I thought, well, here's a problem worth solving. You've got Swifts looking for inadequate nesting places. And at the time, in this village, Land Beach, where we are, I guess there may have been 2, 3, 4 pairs of Swifts in the whole village.
Okay.
20 years ago. Last year, there were 66 pairs of Swifts in Land Beach.
Great stuff.
Virtually all of them in nest boxes that we've organised the installation thereof. So it's quite a Swift village, and so we've got way above the average Swift density locally here.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Good to hear. So, well, that's great. I mean, that's brilliant to hear. And anecdotally, heard from all the guys that came to the Swift party about, what they're doing as part. So, I guess. Can you set a bit of background? Because again, if people are not aware of Swifts, and I mean, what sort of state are Swift numbers in at the moment? Bit of a loaded question, because I think we all know what the answer is going to be.
Well, there's the breeding bird survey. Yeah. People go out and survey breeding birds, including Swifts, from which they provide an annual estimate of the population level. They produce an index.
Yeah.
And over the last 25 years, they've declined by over 60%.
Yeah.
And that is corroborated by, excuse me, that noise in the background is a baby kestrel. We had kestrels. We've got kestrels and barn owls breeding in our barn just over there. And they bred anyway. This kestrel makes that. Anyway, what was I saying? They declined by over 60%, corroborated by BirdTrack, another much less disciplined survey, but it produces some useful numbers.
But that's like a citizen science.
App, well, there's volunteers, thousands of them, sign up to the BTO and do all this work, and all was hunky-dory until 2019. Then 2020 and the pandemic came along, so surveys got highly disrupted. So 2021 and possibly 22, we don't really have meaningful numbers to compare, and to know what's now hopefully, with all the efforts we are putting in across the country. There's loads of groups like our little group here that we're turning the corner, but we're unlikely to know that now for another, I don't know, 3, 5, 7 years to get another set of numbers.
Yeah.
Because with this hiatus, the numbers after the hiatus are not necessarily comparable. It's a bit apples and pears,
Yeah.
So that's the number of swifts. The official estimate of the number of swifts in the country in 2009, if I remember rightly, was 87,000 pairs. And if you discount that of the decline since then, the official estimate is 50,000 pairs.
Yeah.
But I think they underestimated by a pretty substantial factor. I mean, you can get 40,000 swifts going down the east coast on a single day. Now, that they'll be mostly one-year-old birds, but one-year-old birds is probably, I don't know, 15% of the population or something. So 40,000 swifts must be coming from a population of 250,000 swifts, if I've got my numbers right. But compared with, say, house sparrows with 5 million pairs and starlings with 1.6 million pairs, it's even if it is 250,000 pairs, there's still not enough of them. Oh, wait!
I know this is.
Here we go. Yeah. Sorry about the distraction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is going to be. I'm looking up in the air. It's not that I'm bored with what Dick's saying. There is one hell of a show above us, beyond us, and probably by the end of the interview, it's end of the podcast, we're going to have one going past the camera. I reckon.
Yeah. Well, they do come this height. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then, what are the reasons for their decline? Because again, I think we can all imagine what it might be, but there is the sort of, we've got obviously nesting sites.
Yeah.
Insect populations, both going, but both have been going down at the same time. And we were chatting the other night about and the migratory route as well, that there is
I don't think sparrowhawks might be an issue. Might be. I've just had an email from a very distraught chap. I had a dozen pairs on his house, and a sparrowhawk has taken the lot out, just about. Now, that's unusual. I mean, predators, it's not uncommon to have a sparrowhawk or a kestrel attending to a swift colony and taking large chunks out of it. It happened in the Oxford Museum Tower a few years ago. I think he went from 60 or 70 pairs down to 17 pairs. And now it's recovering. We get a sparrowhawk here. I haven't seen them take one this year. I have in the past. So I mean, there's multiple reasons. I mean, you see loads of nest sites being destroyed by repairing eaves and insulating. I mean, the big one, this with this net zero target, insulating houses, they put 4 inches of insulation on the walls of a house at a cost of 14, 18, 20,000 pounds per house. I don't know, some big number. And when you do that, anything nesting in the eaves, whether it's a bat, a swift, a sparrow, starling, or whatever, that has lost its nest site. So that's going to be big. And we've put a look at this swift. It's about to knock your head off.
Dick, do you mind if we go? So before we touch on people repairing roofs, repairing eaves, insulation. We'll come back to that later on.
Fine.
But again, it's one thing I don't want to miss, because again, for people that don't know a lot about swifts, is do you mind giving a little bit of an idea of their sort of natural history? Like they spend, well, as we've probably seen, they fly at about 70 miles an hour.
Well, right about now there are swifts, young baby swifts, leaping out of nests for their first ever flight, never having flown before. And from the moment they leave the nest, they are now then in the air 24/7 for the next 2 years. They go all the way to Africa, they come back, do a bit of prospecting, go all the way to Africa, come back, hopefully find a nest site somewhere, go all the way to Africa, come back, and then they may breed. And they're probably not very good at it. So they go all the way to Africa, come back, then they start getting the hang of it and getting really successful.
Like a really poor night out in Cambridge.
So, they're really quite extraordinary, the amount of flying they do.
Isn't it like I don't know how they gather this. It's like they can do it in their lifetime 4 million miles. Is that? There's these figures bounded around, but
well, it depends on how much you generalise the route. From here to Mozambique is what, 7,000 miles? Is it?
Yeah.
So there and back is 14,000 miles. 14,000. Well, or do it another way. How fast are they flying on average? What is it? 30 miles an hour? 40 miles an hour? What's 40 miles an hour times 24 hours a day times, 300 days? They're not flying when they're breeding. So, I can't quickly work that out in my head, but
we'll put the answer at the bottom of the podcast, all right? That's what we'll do.
Yeah, and then times an average of 7 years is what they live. That's the average sort of age.
So then, so they spend the majority of their life on the wing, and this is correct me if I'm wrong, this is the salient point. They are site faithful, aren't they? So they will go back to they will try and go back. They
usually come back to the same nest site, but they also occasionally will move from nest site to nest site within a colony. That's also known, but they usually come back to the nest site. So you have a pair in one nest site. Usually, both birds will come back to the same nest. That doesn't mean to say they're necessarily faithful to the same partner. Trying to get into Swift psychology here, who knows what goes on in their heads. But if two birds are faithful to the same nest site, they're likely to be together again the following year.
Yeah.
Now, what can happen is one bird can come back early, and before its mate from the previous year has come back, he goes out and manages to hook up with somebody else, you see? And while he's carrying on with her or him, the original mate turns up, you see, a bit late, and then that results in an almighty punch-up. Who knows who wins?
And did we see some of that punch-up the other night, or was that... No, that's the banging, isn't it? They're prospecting for the...
banging is young birds. Some 1-year-olds, probably 2-year-olds, said to be banging on the to check is anybody at home to see, is this an available nest site, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, funnily enough, here there's been a lot of prospectors around, but very little banging. Which I don't understand, but there you
go. Can you put your finger on it at all, or can you?
No, but very little banging. This morning, actually, there was a bird banging on this starling box up here. Okay. You can hear them. There's chicks, swift chicks, in a starling box up here.
Okay.
The starlings nested before the swifts nested, so they're time sharing.
Time sharing, okay.
The starlings get the first shift, and then the swifts get the second shift.
So there we find. So why I wanted to stop you prematurely about talking about insulation and net zero, because there seems to be two kind of opposing forces where the built environment is all about, correct me if I'm wrong, all about performance, that buildings need to be highly insulated, super performing buildings, but at the same time that works against, or is working against swifts and cavity nesting birds.
Well, we didn't used to build perfect buildings. We left holes and cracks and crannies and stuff in them, which birds and bats and insect heaven knows what would find. Now we build perfect, hermetically sealed buildings. And unless we deliberately incorporate some cavities in those buildings, all these creatures lose their roosting and nesting opportunities. So it ought to be a mandatory requirement to provide a quota of cavities in all new developments. At the moment, it's all guidelines. The British standard says there should be cavities in every dwelling. The Royal Institute of British Architects, the National Planning Policy Guidelines saying there ought to be. So but there's no big stick to say, thou shalt, according to the law, do this, otherwise.
So correct me if I'm wrong, in Cambridge, again, it says it recommends one per
a ratio of one per dwelling.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be in every dwelling, but 2 in every other one, or 3 in every third, or you could have one large building on a site and stick 30 in, and that'll be good enough for 30 dwellings somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's
so there's no stick.
Ooh.
There's a little robin. It's not about this podcast's not about you, mate. So go away for the next 20 minutes. So there's no stick, but where does biodiversity net gain? Does that improve the chances? I mean,
well, there's a couple of things I don't altogether understand. A biodiversity net gain is about habitat, so it's hedges and trees and meadows and maybe green walls, maybe green roofs. It's all, and it's not about specific species. So nest boxes or cavities don't count towards habitat. So if you put a load of nest boxes in, your biodiversity net gain score doesn't record anything. Well, I don't understand the logic of that, but that's what it is. So, but a planning department can mandate, to giving planning approval to a developer, they can mandate that a certain quota of nest boxes ought to be incorporated in the development.
Okay.
Now, that's all. And you think, well, that's great. So then they mandate that, but what happens is, we have a new town near here called Northstowe.
Yes.
Right? And a friend of mine, John Willis, and myself walked the streets of Northstowe, plans in hand, with where all the nest boxes were supposed to be. And there were about 5 or 6 different developers. Not one of these developers has done 100% of what they were supposed to do. Some got close, like 95%. Some did maybe 10 or 20%. Some did none. And you find that, well, okay, isn't somebody going to mandate this? There's no monitoring by the planning department of what they specified in their permission to build. And so that they, and then they don't have people or any budget to enforce. You see,
if I had £1 for every time somebody said that in a different subject matter related to different subjects, it's just it's the enforcement, isn't it?
Yeah. And the enforcement, when it comes, is usually the form, oh well, we missed the boat on that one, we'll make up for it on the next one.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you have had some success. I mean, if you go onto the Action for Swift website, you click on homepage, you'll see some down the bottom. There's some big developers there.
Oh yes.
And you've had, there's local developer Dean and Dean.
Yes.
Taylor Wimpey.
Taylor Wimpey. Hopkins Homes.
And what's the other one?
The Barclay Group. We've done some.
Now so. Because I've heard because Barclay are very good with their
Duchy of Cornwall's done a fair bit. That's not local, but
yeah. So again, in those situations, let's take Taylor Wimpey as a sort of a case study. What conversations are you having with them? When are you having them? When are you having them, and what stage of the process are you having? And then what have you had sort of back from Taylor Wimpey? Because that seems like a really beyond the press release, that seemed like a really good collaboration.
We're now well and truly on their radar, and any new development, they decide their national policy is 80% ratio nest boxes as well. Not bad, not 100%, but we'll take it. And so from time to time, they'll contact us and say, we're building another 20 houses. Can we have 15 nest bricks, please?
Forgive me for being nosy. How did that conversation start? Did you just literally one day you get a phone call?
Oh no, that is a long story. It's like, there's a lady lives in Over,
yes,
called Helen Pletz, and she started a project.
They want to get in on the show, don't they? Look at them.
She started a project called the Over and Swavesey Swift Conservation Project, and she obtained a grant from South Cambs District Council to put up nest boxes in her local village. And I don't know how many nest boxes she's put up, but it's probably knocking on towards 200. Now these are external nest boxes under people's eaves and on their gables and this sort of thing. And she's become a bit of a campaigner, and she is pretty good at penetrating these organisations. And she was the person who got the attention of Taylor Wimpey and said, look, you really should be putting Swift bricks in your new developments, and it all stemmed from her. 10 out of 10 to her. Wow. That's how it happened.
And then, so how many developments with Taylor Wimpey have you sort of?
It's about 3 or 4 different developments now, all local to here, either in Camborne or Northstowe.
Okay. And then, so does that come down to just, because like we said earlier with, about Northstowe and them not being implemented, I mean, how have you made sure, how has it been made sure that they have been implemented? Is it just down to quite literally the site manager, really being bought into the concept?
No, it's usually their buyers contact me and say, can we have another 15 or another 20 or even another 30? So we set to and then deliver them to site, and they, as far as I can tell so far, they do a good job. So it's too early to know what Swifts we've got in them yet, because it's only a year or 2 in. But,
yeah.
So, and monitoring these things is always the difficult thing. It takes a long time to figure out that there's nothing in a Swift box.
Okay. Well, unless they've got a fancy camera like you.
Yeah. Well, no, I've been looking at thermal imaging devices recently, but that may help somewhat to tell which box has got something in and which hasn't.
Yeah.
Rather than hanging around there for 2 hours and finding nothing. So,
I knew we'd get it.
You must have got that one here.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to concentrate when you've got such a show going on. Yeah. But again, it's you mentioned the word monitoring, and to me, this what keeps coming up is sort of, to monitor, you need that sort of community effort. That real community effort.
Yeah, and we haven't managed to organise that much down in Fulbourne.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
John Willis has, but it's actually got out of hand. In Fulbourne, some years ago, they knocked down 70 odd 1960s prefabs, which had Swifts in. Anyway, long story short, South Cambs District Council again mandated Swift boxes in the new houses, and they put, I think it's 276 Swift boxes there, and now there's over 100 pairs of Swifts. Yes. I mean, originally there was only 70. I mean, this is the way we wanted to go.
Yeah.
And But to monitor that number of boxes you need an army.
You've got half an army. From what I gathered from the other night, you've got half an army there.
Yeah. But John runs walks, every Wednesday night through the season. But to detect everything that's going on is impossible. So
yeah, but it's again, it's not. I mean, it's been really nice to see. These are not sort of isolated groups. There is a real sort of bottom up sort of.
Well, back in 2014, we ran a conference here in Cambridge.
Yes.
The Cambridge International Swift Conference. A whole load of people.
Were you comparing, I guess?
Yeah, I sort of led the organisation a bit, I suppose. Anyway, 150 people showed up from 25 countries, talking about everything from edible nest swiftlets to...
Again,
edible nest swiftlets.
Okay.
American swiftlets, South American swifts. I mean, it's just, yeah. Anyway, out of that conference came the idea that we need a network in this country. And so something called the Swifts Local Network was born.
Okay.
Which now has about, 300 groups signed up to it across the country. All of them doing stuff. Some of them really very active, like us.
Yeah.
Some of them will be a single individual. And there's a Google group that they communicate.
Yeah.
Stuff, and they all feed off each other, and many of them doing great things. So heaven knows how many nest boxes are going in every year. There's a local guy here, John Stimpson, who we did some designs for him 12 years ago, a long time ago, and he's built 32,000 nest boxes in his garage. 32,000, and there's many other people building the same and other designs of nest box. Then there's all the nest box manufacturers. So I wouldn't surprise me if there's 10,000 nest boxes a year going in. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know, but
so. Have you got a feeling of how many nest boxes we need to have up to sort of counteract all the nesting sites we've kind of destroyed? Is it? That's perhaps.
Well, yeah. If you take the official estimate of 87,000 in 2009, if you base it on that. And if you take the numbers of pairs lost in the last 25 years, I think that works out 130,000 pairs lost.
Yeah.
If you sort of extrapolate back from 2009 to where it was 25 years ago and what it is now, that difference is 130,000 pairs.
Yeah.
If you said, what's the occupancy? You put up a nest, how many of them get occupied? Let's say 50, say half of them.
Yeah.
Say. Might be less than that. Some places it'll be more. I don't know. Say it's half. So if you want to get 130,000 swifts back, that's ignoring any losses prior to 25 years ago, because there's absolutely no data prior to 25. It's probably a whole ton were lost before that, but just the last 25 years. So if half of them are occupied, you need to put up 260,000, right? Yeah. So if you assume that the official estimate is wrong by at least a factor of 4, I reckon. You mean a million nest boxes to be put up? You see, but that's doable. Well, I always quote the example of the Americans and their purple martin. When America was our colony and we knocked down all the trees.
Yeah.
At some point, they started putting up purple martin houses.
Mm.
And apparently there's 1 million homes in eastern North America with a purple martin house.
Okay.
So these numbers, so we need 1 million homes. Well, there are 25 million homes in the country, for heaven's sake. To get a nest box in 1 in 25, that's doable, isn't it?
You'd like to think so.
Well, I mean, the government wants to build 300,000 houses a year.
Yeah, of course it does.
So
yeah.
if you're going to have a ratio of 1 to 1, there should be 300,000 nest boxes going in every year. It only take you 3 or 4 years to get your 1 million.
Yeah.
So I may dream, but
Well, you know, you get a few more Taily Wimpies on board, and
yeah, it's all doable,
it is. No, it totally is.
and the cost is nothing. You know, you have £500,000 house with 30-40 quid's worth of nest box in it. I mean,
That's not going to break the bank, is it?
no.
So I don't think it's going to be difficult, because the one thing that stayed with me when we met a couple of weeks ago is use the phrase hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And I hate to kind of devalue or commodify nature in that way, but it's very tangible nature, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, people don't get sort of, I don't know, some people do, but perhaps people don't get too excited about, I don't know, soprophytic beetles, you know, or earthworms, because they can't, you know, it's slightly intangible, isn't it? But when you have the swifts, you know, displaying like they were the other night, it's something that communities can sort of get hold of and work
Very
with.
few people don't like swifts. Yeah, I mean, it is such an amazing spectacle. But I mean, unfortunately, all the other wildlife just gets ignored. I mean, I used to run a moss trap right here, and while I did it, I don't know, I had 300 species of moth right here.
Yeah.
I mean, over a period of time. And there is fantastic biodiversity. But swifts are so visible, so spectacular, so much fun, that, you know, it's... one maybe feels guilty about not paying attention to all these other wonderful things. You know? But what can you do for a beetle? I suppose you can put up a beetle bank.
I suppose you can. Yeah, the sort of.
I mean, that is a sort of point worth making. That, you know, why swifts? Because there's all sorts of things in trouble. You know, turtle doves and spotted flycatchers and wood warblers and heaven knows what. And you know, what can small groups and individuals do for all these other things? You know, if you wanted to do something for turtle doves, what can the individual do beyond joining up with the RSPB or the Wildlife Trust or whoever and throw your money at them and hope they can do something at a policy level?
Yeah.
And likewise, what could the RSPB or the Wildlife Trust do about swifts apart from encouraging their members to do something as individuals? You know, it really is swifts is one of those things about the individual, the small groups, except for the developers, and where you know, the RSPB and the Wildlife Trust should be able to do something is at the policy level, to get through the right channels to get some big stick stuff into the law.
So is there any big sticks coming down the sort of the track?
Not we know of. Even just trying to get a nest box as part of the score sheet for biodiversity net gain doesn't seem to be possible. You know, nest boxes are not habitat, apparently. I don't understand that. But.
So going back, so what with Taylor Wimpey, what was and because let me circle back, because on the podcast a few times Berkeley Homes, whatever they're called, have come up, and the fact that they're very much like, you know, they're hard-nosed developers. They're not, but nature sells, you know, and that's kind of a mindset shift, isn't it? Like, you know, it's good for the environment, yes, but
there's this horrible term called greenwashing. you know,
Yeah.
if they can tick enough boxes which are quotes green, unquote, whether it's an effective conservation intervention, who cares, provided they're classified as green and they're net zero, and you know, I'm getting cynical
Sustainable
now.
and,
You know, it's all this stuff.
Blah blah blah.
You know, but you know, but this is something which is a proven effective conservation intervention. It's shown that owners of houses love it, having swifts nesting in their houses.
Yeah.
You know, it's very rare for somebody not to like that. So therefore, it's certainly not going to get in the way of a house being sold, and might even make the house being sold more likely if it's this way. But
well, if we go back to Fulbourn, how the development was called Swifts, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And
well, that was driven by the locals saying, "Okay, you're going to knock down all our old prefabs. What are you going to do about our Swifts?"
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a wonderful project. That.
So, so say for example, so we won't mention the developer's name, but have you, as an example, have you spoke to those guys over there?
What, next door?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're going to get 20 Swift bricks in there.
Excellent.
Well, I was asked, do I approve of this development? I don't. I said fine, provided you put 20 Swift bricks in. Now we'll see whether they do it. So, yeah.
But I don't know. I'd like to labour that point, because it's almost like people do want to be surrounded by nature. So although there's not the stick. Have you thought about the end?
Absolutely.
The end buyer of that house might want to go one step beyond a sort of a B hotel and have.
Yeah. And the ecology profession is not properly up to speed on this. A lot of what is done in the name of green is greenwash.
Yeah.
And it's.
So you say with the ecology profession, do you feel that there's perhaps there is emphasis on bats? There's emphasis because they're specifically protected by.
Yeah, for some reason, bats and newts get an extraordinary level of protection. There's 6 million bats in UK churches. You see, so. And there seem to be great crested newts everywhere.
Well, I think for some developers, there's too bloody many of them, isn't there?
Well, if a developer has great crested newts on site and he has to do something about it and build a whole pond and habitat, he's probably into $100,000 to look after the newts.
Yeah.
And likely with bats, if he's got to do something, it costs him a fortune. We're just saying, look, for swifts, it's just 30 quid, stick a brick in and job done. So don't ask me to explain why. It's all a mystery to me why it's so difficult.
So then if I'm listening to this now and I'm thinking, this is a sort of a loaded question, because it's something I want to do in our village. So how, what is the best route? Because I know the audience that listens to this, they want to listen and they want to do stuff. So how does a sort of a village group, a group of people organise all this? How do they get the Swift boxes in the right place? Is there a methodology to it? Like, are you putting it on the south side of the wall, the north side? It's a very practical question.
Well, a sensibly designed nest box you can put on a south-facing wall, provided it's got thick enough walls, and preferably if it's got a white roof, and maybe the wall. If it's, don't go putting a black thin-walled box on a south-facing wall. No, not a good idea.
No.
A Swift brick's on a south-facing wall is fine. It's got an inch of brick on the front of it. That's not going to overheat. So aspect doesn't really matter, subject to it being a sensible. But we've got loads of Swift brick or nest boxes on south-facing walls with the Swifts are perfectly happy. Height is an important issue.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Ideally, you want to get above 5 meters.
Okay.
Ideally, as you come below 5 meters, success rates will fall.
Because I like
4 meters is still okay. 3.5 is probably as low as you go. Swifts can nest down to 1.5 meters.
But they like to dive though. Sorry,
Yeah, they could. Yes, they do. But there are swifts nesting at 1.5 meters. Not many. So you're not going to get a whole lot of success if you stick a nest box at 1.5 meters. So 4 meters and up, 5 meters and up better. Yeah, that's what you want to do.
And then if you haven't got any, sadly, some villages, some groups might not have any swifts in the village. So
that doesn't matter. That's even more reason to put up nest boxes if they haven't got any at all. Because you kind of track them by playing the calls through a simple little MP3 player. Stick a tweeter near the box, even in the box.
Would a windowsill do if I had a little?
That'll work if you can just get them near the building. The closer to the box, the better.
Yeah.
But if that's inconvenient to get it, right next to the box or in the box, a windowsill even on the ground will work, provided you get your swifts into you play the calls and some passing swift will pick up on it and show an interest.
Okay.
That's the nearest thing to a silver bullet. There's never any guarantees, There are people who have been trying for 10 years and no swifts. But that's not often.
So practically though, so somebody listens to the podcast. I'm all infused. Let's get a box. Let's get a brick. What are the costs? What are the lifetime costs? What are the maintenance? What's the practical? Once you get a box up.
Well,
what are the practical implications of that?
The cost of boxes varies between probably 20 quid. And knocking on towards 200 quid. Yeah.
For
a single chamber.
Yeah.
A very popular workhorse box is a thing called the Model 30, which is the thing that John Stimpson makes. And he makes it with a plywood body and a PVC top.
Yeah.
So if it's not exposed, it should last indefinitely, but eventually plywood is not going to look very good. Ultimately there'll be moisture hitting the ends of the box, and eventually. So we've started making them wholly out of PVC, which should last forever.
Okay. Material choices are something you've got to think about now. Post Grenfell.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There is stricter fire regulations.
Yeah, for taller, it applies to taller buildings, 18 meters at the moment. Doesn't apply to lower buildings yet.
Okay, but have you found in the process with Action for Swifts that you've had to sort of up your game and
we've developed something totally fireproof. Yes.
Okay.
So we have an S brick with a galvanized steel nest chamber and fireproof sealant, and it won't burn at all. So that'll be fine for Grenfell Tower. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So then, moving on from that, if you think about perhaps the conversations you would like to have in the future, you mentioned when people are doing refurbs and you hear horror stories about people doing property maintenance company, people working at the council. Who would who in the future do you want to be speaking to and have those conversations? Because have you spoke to people at the Cambridge County Council about council, but
the city council regularly get on to us if they're doing some external wall insulation or they look for other opportunities and pass them to us, and so we've got quite a few nest boxes installed in the city now with swifts in them already. So
Is that the work of Guy Belcher? Have you?
he's often the he arranges the contact, and then I go and talk to the contractors
Great
and the
stuff.
people, and we make something happen.
Sorry, this is a very Cambridge-centric podcast,
But you see, sometimes what you can do is very simple. I mean, there was a case in Bedford some years ago. They were doing a major replacement of soffits in all the houses, and they were actually entombing breeding swifts. You see? And a local lady there, Jane Kelly, blew the whistle, and our guys, Jake Allsop and Bill Murrells, went over there and spoke to them and said, well, look, what you better do is our cat's just brought a mouse in. Look at it. What have you got? Oh God. Anyway.
that's what you do. What's that happen when you do a live podcast?
Yeah. Anyway, what they said is that you just need to put holes in the soffits. So the contractors agreed to do that for £3 a hole. I mean, I don't know how many holes, a couple of hundred holes.
Yeah.
They put, and there were holes of all shapes and sizes. There was no quality control. But anyways, it's now Bedford's largest swift colony. Just by a very simple and low cost intervention.
Can you just repeat that? Low cost, simple intervention.
Low cost. It was just holes. If you put holes in soffits, space them out a bit so that the birds are not colliding. Whatever, 1.5 meters apart. Say the birds will look after themselves.
Yeah.
If you want them closer together, you have to put something inside. But that's more complicated. So, but and we've done a bit of that in Cambridge, and we've got swifts in them. It's so simple, isn't it? If you just simply, and they will literally just be nesting in the soffits, not in a chamber or anything. No, they're just nesting on a PVC soffit.
Yeah,
perfect.
Almost too simple, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, on the continent, your pallid swifts nest in they've got all these window blinds, and there's a space at the top of the window blinds. You've got pallid swifts nesting on a very similar horizontal surface inside the window. So, yeah.
So what does go on the continent? Because obviously, well, not obviously, but swifts aren't. I know we think we're the centre of the universe, but we're not here in Britain. But they're not obviously just coming to England. What is the sort of nesting sites? What's the sort of what happens?
Well,
I think just curious more than anything.
In southern Europe, I don't think they're declining anything like what they are in northern Europe. I mean, we've got so many pantiles, and they're all in the pantiles. The conservation status of swifts on the continent is much more relaxed than it is here and in northern countries, where we've got this rapid decline here. And I mean, all over Europe there are active groups and enthusiasts doing similar stuff to us, especially in Holland, in Denmark, Germany a fair bit, Switzerland a fair bit, Spain. But
I guess it's that interaction between, because we've, over the course of the last 100 years, we've removed their natural nesting sites, that they're in the sort of in the built environment.
To an extent they're going to have the same effect of. I mean, they changed some laws in Italy. You've got these pantile roofs where the swifts could get in the bottom level of pantiles and nest somewhere up in the roof. Must get hellish hot up there in the summer. And people would be concreting off these entrances. And there are some places where they're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Got to let the birds in, you see. So, but this business of the reason for the loss, the decline of swifts, doubtless loss of nest sites is one of the reasons. But there's probably other reasons as well. I mean, you can't blame the sort of decline of spotted flycatchers on lots of nest sites. There's something to do with the migration. It's something to do with insects. But with swifts, to what extent the insect problem is a contributor, it's hard to say. You see, productivity rates of breeding swifts have not declined a whole lot, maybe a little bit, but not much. Loss of insects you'd expect. them to be raising fewer chicks on average.
Yeah.
But I don't think they are. Not by a big factor, anyway. But the swift, you see, can go a hell of a long way to feed. They go 10, 20, 30, 40 kilometres. And there's bound to be a food resource somewhere within that radius, a water body or a...
But is that what they do naturally, by feeding in that kind of 40-mile radius, or is that just...
I think so. I mean, the various tracking studies have been done. Brian Cahalan, for example, he lives...
So that guy's his name?
Is Brian Cahalan.
Yeah, okay.
He's a big swift man in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
He's got, I don't know, 50 pairs on his house, and they've put trackers on some of his swifts. And he's about 20 miles from Loch Ney. And where do they go to feed? Loch Ney.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, dear. Here we go.
I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, but there's a couple of... it's almost like a scene out of Top Gun with a flyby, isn't it?
Yeah.
Expect Tom Cruise to be here in a minute. But so Loch Ney, they're 20 miles away, so that's
and that's what they're doing regularly. And I mean, people who live within striking range of a water body seem to be very highly successful with their nest boxing. There's a chap in Rutland, Tim Collins. He lives next to Rutland Water, big water body.
Yeah.
And he just has to put up a nest box, and before he's down the ladder, there's a swift in there. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit.
Yeah.
But water bodies seem to be a very important food source. Certainly, people who live near big water bodies are very successful with their nest boxing.
Because when I'm thinking, as you're talking, Dick, I'm just thinking that it's trying to how you fit that kind of swift boxes and also nesting sites holistically into a sort of into the wider landscape, and thinking about how it fits into water bodies, how it fits into meadows.
I don't. You see, with everything else, if you want to help house sparrows in your new development, you better make sure there's nice bushy things growing up the walls, and foraging areas and local food and all the rest of it. With swifts, you don't need any of that. A swift will happily nest in a concrete jungle because it, probably within a mile there's food.
Yeah.
And they can easily, as I said, they go 10, 20, 30 miles. I mean.
So you say a concrete jungle. My immediate thought was, has there been much research or observations done on swifts and green roofs?
Swifts and green roofs. I would thought you'd find no significant relationship whatsoever.
Because the reason why I ask is on a lot of sort of biodiverse green roofs, you get a lot of spiders because that's part of.
Yeah.
And
swifts eat spiders a lot. Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you've not kind of.
Well, no. No, I wouldn't have thought so. No.
Fair enough.
No. You don't need to do anything about the habitat and the plants and all the rest of it near to a swift colony. It's everything else you would. Sparrows, starlings have got to have a good food source nearby. Sparrows must have, and all the other insect-eating birds would have to. But swifts can go miles. So with just, talking about insects and the forage, it's not necessarily massively important to have it nearby the nesting sites. But what can people do? So we've got, you can't see it here, but you've got some boxes up here. But you guys have been developing the Swift S-brick, isn't it? Swift brick. Yeah.
So again, let's take it from a few angles. Visually, how does it kind of fit in? Because that's fitting. Because if I'm an architect, I'm looking at
the S-brick arose because, as I mentioned earlier, John Willis and myself walked around Northstowe, really finding out what developers were not doing. and then asking ourselves the question: well, if anybody were to enforce this, with what was then on the market in the way of a Swift brick, is something at least 2 courses of bricks high and at least a brick and a half long. And if they're going to force them to retrofit that in a wall, it's quite a major piece of work, and may not look very pretty.
They'd never match up the pointing, would they?
No, it may not look very pretty when they've done it. And so I had, prior to this, developed some prototype, well, I showed you one of them, some prototype S-bricks, and we put them up under people's eaves. We put 6 up on 3 houses to see what do Swifts think of something the size of a brick, or the size of a brick and the cavity behind it. Would Swifts accept that? Anyway, we got 6 pairs of Swifts in them.
Now we're talking
and then I didn't do anything about that idea until this walk with John Willis, and I thought, if they're going to mandate this, if we came up with this idea of a box occupying the space of a single brick and its mortar, that's doable.
So just to confirm, so it's the. So what's the volume of that? So it's the volume of a brick.
Well, it's the volume of a brick and its mortar and the cavity behind.
Okay,
So
you'd get a breeding.
It's about 400 square centimeters of floor space. And when people look at it, they say, "Is that big enough for a pair of Swifts?" And they're young, you see. And when I point out, it's actually larger than most other Swift bricks on the market. Not all, but it's larger than most of them. There are Swift bricks on the market with 300 square meters of floor space, and only 10 centimeters wide, and so it's plenty big enough that the internal height is something over 8 centimeters. And we know of Swifts nesting in spaces 4 centimeters high. Anyway, we've got videos of Swifts in S bricks, and they're fine. So the idea was, why don't we dust off this idea that I'd had several years previously and turn it into a product? So first of all, it's a matter of what material do we make it out of? You see, I don't know. Anyway, with Stanley knives on the kitchen table and glue, and I made more prototypes, and that's how the first ones got installed. And a good friend of mine who really got keen on this idea, he says he wants some in his cottage in the Cotswolds. I don't know how many he's got there now, 12 or 15 of it, and most of them have got Swifts in.
Sounds like a competition who can get the most Swift boxes on their house.
So we started off making them with a nest chamber out of a PVC foam board, all laser cut, so with box joint. And it's a very strong construction, and it's so neat in the wall. And well, the idea was conceived for retrofit, but heck, why not for new build? That's what the original inspiration was for retro. So, and then we started meeting other requirements, like some people have only got 50mm cavities. So for that, we can get about 130 mils of internal space, which is 3 centimeters more than some other boxes on the and we go 1.5 bricks, so we get our 400 square centimeters, and we put 1.5 brick slips on the front. And then somebody said, "Oh, well, it's got to be fireproof." So I tried all sorts of crazy ideas and that. But anyway, eventually stumbled upon a sheet metal shop who could knock up a nest chamber at a very good price. So we've now got fireproof one. And then somebody wanted them for a rendered wall, so we had to figure out so we can do that. And so there's quite a range now.
So one thing I saw on, I don't normally go on Facebook, but I went on the Action Swift Facebook. How do Swift boxes, Swift bricks, Swift nesting boxes fit with listed buildings? What's the deal there?
Well, there's two approaches. One is it better to ask for permission or to ask for forgiveness? Anyway. No, but there is a... my view is I would never want to do something that messes up the appearance of a listed building. I would just turn away. If I feel I can do something which is really in keeping with the building, I'll go for it. And we've done quite a lot with the stones. We take a piece of stone that comes out of the wall of the building, make a nice cavity, and put an S-brick behind this stone slip and stick it back. And if somebody gets the right shade of mortar, the only difference you see in the wall is a hole in one stone.
Yeah.
Now, whether a planning inspector responsible for listed buildings is going to object to that or not, I don't know.
But what I was going to say, it'd be interesting to see if has been any sort of case studies or planning.
I haven't run into it much with listed. I mean, we've done a lot in churches, which is. Churches are a huge opportunity for Swift boxes. There's 16,000 churches in the UK. Most of them have got a belfry.
Yeah. Most
belfries are suitable, and you can stick. I mean, if you want, I can take you up the church after we finish and show you what we got there.
Yeah, lovely.
And there's two boxes on camera about to flare. They might have gone by the time we get them. They were there this morning.
We'll leg it.
Yeah. And if you put boxes in the belfry, it doesn't get in the way of the bell ringers. The sound gets out just the same. It doesn't affect the external appearance of the church. It doesn't do anything structural. Then there's nothing not to like. And in one church, I mean, here we've got 13 or 15 pairs in the one belfry. In Ely, we've got a church with 58 pairs in one belfry. In Bury St Edmunds, we got one with 48 pairs. In St Neots, we got one with 48 pairs. In Worlington, we got one with 30 pairs. I mean, these are big colonies made from nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not expensive. You know, if the cost of a sheet of ply is 30 quid or something.
By the time this goes out, it'll be 50.
A couple of sheets of ply, you can make a whole ton of nest boxes to put behind the louvers in a belfry.
Yeah.
And provided you've got competent volunteers, you can do it for 100 or 200 quid.
Yeah.
Employ a professional carpenter and multiply that by 10.
But you normally get competent people in these groups, don't you?
Well, it's not Chippendale furniture, So you want it to be good, but it doesn't have to be immaculate.
Go through that again. So, 15 pairs.
There's 15 pairs down here,
and then so interesting. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, really. I mean, again, I'm just also thinking, obviously, churches quite literally at the centre of the village, aren't they?
There's churches at the centre of the village, yeah. If you just only did churches in the country, you'd solve the Swift problem. You have to do a lot of churches.
Well, let's pray for that, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you work it out. If you believe this estimate of 50,000 pairs in the whole country, that's one pair for every 1,300 people.
Yeah.
This village has got 800 people, so we don't even deserve one pair of Swifts. Well, there's one pair within 5 yards of us here. And there's another 60 odd pairs. So
I'm just always bracing myself that you say that and it comes by, but
yeah. Well, this is the quiet spell. It's this evening they'll all go bananas. So, yeah.
Well, Dick, it's been an absolute pleasure going on this podcast with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah.